Donald Trump's racist provocations are going to lead to violence sooner or later, and that's what he wants. Recently, he issued an executive order that was basically titled Unleash the Police. And last week, his Civil Rights Division in the Department of Justice, led by Harmeet Dillon, did a couple of things. She announced that she is shifting the focus of the Civil Rights Division away from what its focus has been for the last 70 years that made it the crown jewel of the Department of Justice. She is shifting its focus away from discrimination against marginalized communities in the United States, including Black people and the LGBTQ community and women and the disabled, to focusing on discrimination against white Christians in the United States, religious discrimination, discrimination against religious people. And we all saw Donald Trump's treatment of the Black president of South Africa in the Oval Office this week. Donald Trump is absolutely desperate to get Black Americans out in the streets protesting. There have been a lot of protests over the last 4 months. And every protest that I've gone to has pretty much been white people exclusively. And the police have just hung out on the outer edges, leaning up against buildings. The one protest that I read about where there were a significant number of arrests was in Philadelphia, and most of the people that were arrested were Black people, and the majority of those were Black women. A lot of those were older Black women. But Donald Trump wants racial violence in the streets in the United States, and he can't get that unless there are Black people, Black Americans protesting in the streets. He wants that, first of all, because he's incredibly racist and he hates Black people, and he really hates Black women, especially educated Black women. But he also wants to use it as a pretext for his martial law bullshit.
A very good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're watching us from. Welcome back to another episode of this YouTube channel. Now, today I want to ask you something. Have you ever felt like you're watching a man light a match in a room full of gasoline just to see what happens? All right, you had been right, because according to the recent analysis, Donald Trump isn't just playing politics, he's playing with fire. Allegedly, he's orchestrating a deliberate campaign to provoke racial violence, not just as a byproduct of policy, but as a strategy, a dangerous one. One that turns Black Americans into his enemy within, the internal threat he needs to justify something even darker. We are talking about martial law, about authoritarian control, the revival of white supremacists, patriarchal America, not by accident, but by design. I'm not talking about conspiracy theories here. There is none that is fluff. This is about real executive orders, real Department of Justice changes, and real shifts in civil rights enforcement that points to one terrifying possibility. Trump is trying to manufacture a crisis, one that will give him the political cover to seize extraordinary power. But the question is, why aren't Black Americans playing along? Stay with me, because what's unfolding in America right now is deeper than most people are willing to admit. So sit back, relax, and let us unpack this chaos. I'll be back with my further commentary.
And we've all seen his immigration policies and practices over the last 4 months, and what he's doing to brown people and immigrants. And he wants, he and his supporters basically want an all-white America again. They want white supremacist, male-dominated patriarchy, white male-dominated patriarchy, white supremacist country that is also an authoritarian theocracy. He also, his handpicked U.S. attorney in New Jersey, Alina Habba, who prior to representing him had been an attorney specializing in representing parking garages, and she defended him, such as the case may be, in a lawsuit that he filed against Hillary Clinton and a bunch of other people that resulted in him having to pay over $1 million in their attorney's fees, Hillary Clinton's attorney's fees. She represented Trump in the civil case in New York that he lost, and he now owes the state of New York over $600 million. And she represented him in the second E. Jean Carroll case that resulted in an $83 million verdict against him. So he rewarded her legal genius by making her the U.S. attorney for the state of New Jersey. And a couple of weeks ago, 3 members of Congress and the mayor of Newark, New Jersey, went to an ICE detention facility in Newark, New Jersey, and there was a kerfuffle, and there were 2 people. Well, there was one person who was arrested on scene, the black mayor of Newark, Ras Baraka, and then this past week, they arrested Congresswoman LaMonica McIver, a Democrat from New Jersey, whose district includes most of Newark, New Jersey. The other 2 members of Congress were not arrested. And add in the 4 months of anti-DEI. This is an explicitly racist administration. And I'm sure that it is incredibly confusing to Donald Trump as to why Black Americans are not out in the streets in force as they were during the summer of 2020. And we saw all of the police violence that accompanied those protests because Black people were out in the streets. The last 4 months, the protests have been all white people, primarily. And Trump and local police forces do not meet those crowds with police violence. They just don't. And, it's incredibly important, I think, that people who look like me continue to show up to these protests consistently, day after day after day, over the next several months or years. But we can always just go back home and at the end of the day and retreat into our whiteness. I heard that phrase from a Black woman on this app. I can't remember who it was, or I would give her credit, but that just stuck with me. We can retreat into whiteness. That's always our top designation category. But it's like when you look at the authoritarian playbook, he's got to find an enemy within. And sure, he's got immigrants. He's been railing on DEI. He hasn't yet come out and just when you look at the language that he uses about immigrants, it's incredibly dehumanizing language, refers to them as vermin, poisoning the blood of our country. And He did that during the campaign with the Haitians in Ohio, the Haitian immigrants in Ohio. They're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs. And he, since Inauguration Day, he hasn't used that kind of language explicitly about Black Americans at scale. But again, I think he's got to be just absolutely dumbfounded at the things that he is doing with his executive orders, what his civil rights division and the DOJ is doing, how he's treated leaders like the president of South Africa, the things he's been doing with DEI, an incredibly racist administration. I'm sure he's utterly dumbfounded as to why Black Americans are not out in the streets. But if they do, and he gets to use violence, then he will have his enemy within the United States. He views immigrants as an enemy without to get rid of. But if he gets Black people out into the streets, they're going to be his enemy within. He's desperate for it. He's absolutely desperate for it.
Welcome back to the channel, good folks, and I want to do some analysis and breakdown on all these things. So according to the guy in the video, Trump's strategy depends on protests, specifically Black protests, not just any protests, not even ones we've seen recently dominated by white demonstrators. No, he wants images of Black people in the streets, angry, defiant, and visible. Why? Because that, to him, justifies state violence. I've said by saying he wants to divide America racially. That justifies the tanks, the tear gas, the curfews, and if he gets his way, the declaration of martial law. You see, in the last few months, protests have been mostly white, and police just lean against buildings, observing. But in 2020, when Black Americans flooded the streets over George Floyd murder, we saw rubber bullets, riot gear, and mass arrests. And let us be real, Trump noticed the difference. No, fast forward to today, he was watching quietly, waiting, wondering why these streets ain't filled with Black anger, even as he defends DI, arrests Black officials, and shifts the civil rights divisions to focus on white Christian discrimination. Think about that. A government arm once created to protect the marginalized is now focused on defending the dominant. This is not a policy reform. This is a signal. And behind it all, the same question: why aren't Black folks protesting? Well, he's not just confused, he's frustrated. Because in his worldview, no violence can erupt unless Black people are involved. He believes Black rage is the spark he needs. Yes, but instead of a spark, he's met with silence. Black people are silent. They are thinking smart, strategic, defiant, but very powerful. Yes, you heard that right. And as I wind up, I want us to think critically and let us unravel the clear picture. What we are witnessing is not just dangerous. It's a deliberate weaponization of race and fear, and it's being fueled by an ideology that has always centered white dominance and Black submission. According to the speaker in the video, Trump hates Black people, especially educated black women. And that's not an isolated insight. That's the foundation of this whole strategy. Because Black women in particular represent something in his movement: despise, intelligence, leadership, and unshakable resistance. So when Black women protest, whether in Congress, in community organizing, in the streets, they become targets. I hope you remember Philadelphia, mass arrests, but mostly Black. mostly women. Some of them, elderly, they are too old to be arrested. They don't even have the strength. So this is not a coincidence. It's a pattern. And Trump allegedly is desperate to create it. He wants the chaos of 2020, not to calm the nation, but to claim it's broken. To say, look at these ungrateful, violent people. We need law and order. It's kind of law. It's kind of order codes. So one where the constitution bends to fear, where civil rights become optional, where authoritarianism wears a red hat and calls itself freedom. But here's the twist. Black Americans are not playing alone. Instead of raising in anger, they are watching, waiting, thinking, and voting. And that scares him more than any protest ever could. Because Trump doesn't know how to control silence, he doesn't know how to spin dignity. He can't provoke resistance when the resistant has outgrown his has outgrown his tactics. Black Americans have seen this before, from slave patrols to Jim Crows. To Jim Crow laws, to the COINTELPRO. They have lived through provocations designed to justify repression so that they can be unleashed with police brutality against them. But this time is different. They're coming differently. So as Trump tries to gaslight a nation into a civil war, one racial flashpoint at a time, we need to be clear. The enemy within isn't us. It's the ideology that wants to divide us. It's the people willing to burn the country down just to rule over the ashes. The power isn't rage anymore. The power is clarity, in exposure, in truth. And if Trump thinks racial violence is pathway to power, then the refusal to give him that violence may be the greatest form of resistance we've ever had. I want you people to stay smart, stay aware, to stay unprovoked, because this fight is on. Thank you for watching. Thank you for keeping it with me. Thank you for supporting me. Kindly subscribe, like, comment, share. I hope to see you in my next video. Peace out.